gathered together from the cosmic reaches of the universe, here in this great hall of justice, are the most powerful forces of good ever assembled. Dedicated to truth, justice, and peace for all mankind.
Welcome back, everybody, to Spinner Rack. We're going to be talking about who's faster, Flash.
We're not talking about who's faster.
So,
because we already proved on the YouTube site that Barry's somehow faster now.
Yeah. How?
I don't know. He said something about, obviously, once the Speed Force comes in, it changes its magic. So it's like, okay, Flash's speed is magic. I can steal speed from everybody, so that sort of thing. So it's more magic. It's not the consistent speed that Barry's had over the years. Everything that Barry started with, Wally did, and that almost killed him. So it's like you have this subplot where Barry's fast, he's able to go through walls, vibrate, all that stuff, and then Wally comes off. He can do half of that, and then it's slowly killing him because he was at puberty when he got the powers.
Yeah.
So in the Titans, he's slowly killing them. So he gets to the speed of sound.
Well, you're going way back. You're going way back.
But you have to say with the consistency of the character. You can't just say, the consistency that Barry was around for a long time. Wally was a sidekick, and then for some reason, they decided they got rid of Flash, but then they said, we need another Flash. So Wally takes up the mantle.
Yeah, when he first starts running, he's like speed of sound. He can't vibrate through anything.
And they're saying this is what makes the story work. They're like, hey, this works. This is a little better because now he has to work hard at it. He has to work a little hard. He can't, run through walls.
Yeah, he was like somebody said this before, and I agree with it. He's like the Peter Parker. He was like the Peter Parker for the DC universe at that time.
Parker.
Yeah,
they always everybody's Peter Parker. The Blue Devil, Blue Beetle, Firestorm.
Wally was that everyman character. He was that everyman character. Everybody could tune into him.
He got married. He had two kids.
Yeah, like
That's
Peter
not
Parker.
Everyman.
Like Peter Parker. Then what did they do? Just like Peter Parker, they got rid of his wife and children. Just like Peter Parker.
Peter Parker didn't have. She was pregnant. They didn't
Wally
have
West.
the kid.
Okay,
Peter Parker.
So we digress.
You hear the alliteration? You hear that alliteration, right? Okay.
DC's tried to have Peter Parker like 4 times.
And they succeeded with Wally West.
They did not succeed. How did they succeed with him? What did he do?
What are you talking about?
What was his job? He was the cleanup guy at the cop.
I'm not talking about his employment.
He had a crappy job.
He was the everyman character. I'm not talking about his employment.
Peter Parker had 2. He had this.
Okay. I see where this is going.
Yes.
I see where this is going. All right. Okay.
Yes. So if you go there,
are we gonna keep going? All right.
Yeah. If we go there, for me, Barry's the most. Well, the problem is that you look at the Silver Age stuff, and DC basically started superhero comics again. Like, even though there was Superman and Batman out there, once they did Barry Allen as the Flash, they had not the first accident sort of character, but because they had, Captain Atom, but
that was Charlton.
Yeah, but they're sort of the first, but they really had to push having a successful character. So they had that. Then they had the death, what's her name? Was a Green Lantern. But then Marvel sort of fed off of that. And the only difference was that Marvel fed in, did more stuff as far as the characterization, whereas all of DC's characters were basically like cops. So you had, all of them were sort of like, I'm going out there, I'm stopping something. It wasn't about their problems or troubles. They'd have a hint of, Iris is going to figure this out. But they'd basically be like, here's the villain, I got to take out the villain. And then at some point, I think, Julie Schwartz had issue with a lot of stuff. He had an issue with The World's Finest. He's like, why are we having Batman and Superman, and why the title ultimately ended? So it's like, it's really, does Barry a disjustice to say that we ran out of stories on him. We shouldn't do any more Barry stories. When he has a consistent run over years, it's just like, you just need to get new talent in there and see what next happens. Everything that Wally did, you could have done with Barry, in my opinion. Especially as a job. He had a nice job. He's a forensic scientist.
So the modern take on Barry and Wally, what do you guys think about that?
Well, modern take on Barry is like, I don't really think he's too much different than what he was in the Silver Age. They just give him a little bit more to do. Mm-hmm. And I don't disagree. Most of the DC characters, they're really in this Superman model where they get powers, and when they get powers, they go out to go right wrongs. They're not really thinking too much about it.
Yeah.
Okay. The difference with Wally, and again, Wally is he's closer to a Marvel mode where Wally will go out and do this stuff, but then he's got this, he's got either the thought bubbles or the internal monologue where he's trying to stop Captain Cold, but at the same time he's thinking, damn it, why can't I get my life together? Why won't Linda go out with me? How do I do this, that, and the other? And that allowed people to vibe. No pun intended. That allowed people to vibe.
No vibe here.
That allowed people to vibe with Wally a little bit more. Then you also have this problem. I mean, what they did with Crisis is kind of criminal now when you look back on it.
Yes.
But this is hindsight. At the time, it was cutting edge and had been done before. But what they do with Crisis is that you totally wiped out Barry. He's gone. And then you built up Wally for over 20 years, to the point he had 20 years worth of character development. The big thing was that he was always living in Barry's shadow. He finally breaks out of it. He does stuff that never was done before. Then you bring Barry back, and it's kind of like, well, what the hell do we do? You had like literally 6 Flashes running around, or 6 Speedsters running around. They're like, okay, this is problematic. They do it again. They're like, let's wipe everybody out, and then we're going to bring Barry back, not because Barry was this great character, but because they had developed Wally to the point they didn't know where else to go with him. And so now let's start with Barry again, and we can develop it. And it became a really big problem with that because a lot of guys loved Wally, myself included.
So hold on a second. You're telling me that you think that Wally was a better character as done by DC?
At the end of the day?
At the end of the day.
Wally got with the nuance that, I'm going to say yes, with the nuance that Wally got character development that Barry never got. The biggest thing that they tried to do with Barry to actually give him some depth was they had to put him on trial. He got so bad they had to send him to the future. They had to send him like what? They had to send him like 500 years into the future in order to try to make him relevant. That was a really
that's one writer saying like Carrie Bates is a strong single story writer. He's not good in the continuing, like trying to do Claremont, and that's what you see because he did the same with.
That I would have to disagree with.
What?
Carrie Bates did some really good continuing stories.
Which one?
His
How long?
No, his Superman stories.
As long as that Flash.
Good grief. That wasn't too long.
Yeah,
but he did,
nothing as long as Flash.
No, he did some 4-parters with Superman. He did some 4-parters.
Not talking about 4-parters. I'm talking about like almost 2 years.
But that storyline with the Flash was so ill-advised.
He did the same with.
It was not helpful at all.
He did the same with Captain Adam. He started strong, and then it's like Captain Adam almost going to jail every 2 weeks.
And this is in a time period before we get to 2-year-long storylines.
That's what I'm saying.
They had enough
I said he was a good writer.
They had enough problem with that year-long storyline that was called Crisis on Infinite Earths. That went 6 months. That went 6 months longer than it actually needed to be. But to get back to the point again. Barry never received that type of character development. The character development they tried to foist on him, I don't think was conducive towards him developing in a manner in which he was still going to be sellable, that people could look at him with new eyes. Wally was coming back to a point where he had just gotten his powers back. They had him start at the speed of sound. He wasn't running at the speed of light. He couldn't do half the stuff Barry could. And so every time, when they finally get to the point where he's running at a Planck second, and then they developed that before there was no speed force. So then they actually gave the speed force. So there was a lot of stuff to discover, a lot of new things to come on. And if you were like me and you got into the Flash, and I had read the previous stories before, but this is again, you get to see Barry going through all this stuff and he's on trial and you're just hoping that, I'm not hoping that he catches the villain.
The trial.
It was there.
The trial
I'm not hoping that Barry catches the villain. What am I hoping? I'm hoping that Barry beats the rap. That's
but then it's like, okay, he takes off the mask and it's like he got a different face now. It's like, what is going on? And that's not a good statement on the character.
Question, yes, I believe Wally. But again, to be fair to Barry, he didn't get the character development. His character development was not positive. His character development was more hurtful than it was helpful.
But no, I would say, look at was it the First Frontier? Was it the New Frontier? Like, look at the little bits they could do in connection with him, Iris, sort of saving Iris, stopping Captain Cold, and it's only little bits, like it's almost sound bites as far as comic. And you're saying that sort of stuff, just give it time. But the way they did it in Crisis was he dies sort of in issue 2, and then he dies to show how he died in like 6 or was it 8. So it's like, what? Because you remember he like loses his body, he like starts to disintegrate, and then they explain what happened. So it's like he got the worst send off. Like Supergirl got a better send off than And the only one that got
Because
worse was Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman got
Well, she didn't
turned
get
into
anything.
clay.
She just say, "Hey, bye."
They ended her comic, and then she got shot, like a side cut shot.
But that was
and she got
supposed to
shot
be,
over
that
there.
whole thing was supposed to be redemptive for him because of all the nonsense that he went through in his regular
That's
book.
not redemptive.
And I didn't say it was, I said it was supposed to be. Okay, so again, it breaks down to the character development. He was not really given any chance to really shine at any
gentlemen,
point.
bringing it forward, the characters now, Wally and Barry, together, what do you think?
What, in this current thing?
In the current now.
I think it's fine to have.
What's the question? Who's better?
No, not who's better. I mean, one point you were making is that you thought that why bring back Barry? Wally was a strong enough character.
Yeah, but I can say the same thing. Why get rid of Barry? You know, all you have to do is tell. Petey's correct on that. All you have to do is tell some better stories.
Yeah.
That's usually with any character. Did you have to get rid of New 52 Superman? No, you need to tell some better stories.
Well, I would just that's the thing is like saying setting up what his having Iris and having the for instance the forensic scientist in comparison to having the cop mechanic in Wally, like it almost feels like Starbrand, and I'm like saying I don't want to have any sort of aspect of the new universe Starbrand in my Flash. I like him having the job. I like him being a scientist, and it adds more things you can do. I mean, it's not as down to earth as the stuff they did with Wally, but I think, because I think like Jeff Johns got to a point where you read it and you couldn't really tell a difference because what was it in what's the city he's in? Is it not Star City?
It's Keystone.
Or is it Central? Is it
Central?
Central. So Central City, the bridge is broken. He picks up some books on basically how to build a bridge, and he builds the bridge. But the way it's done, as far as the art, like when Scott Collins does it, it's like, yeah, but that's more of a Barry scene because it's also working in science and the scientific mind. He's like, oh, I'm using speed. So it's like, if he has that, why is he still a mechanic?
Yep.
Why is he sitting around?
Well, the whole thing was supposed to be that they could. The whole thing was that they were supposed to be able to accumulate the knowledge, but they couldn't retain it. So they would be able to speed it in. They could do all this stuff, but they weren't going to be able to retain it. And then Bart is supposed to be the one who can actually retain it. But I mean, they even have Barry now, where Barry supposedly his speed allows him to even predict what's supposed to happen. Like he can predict the future. And after a while, I'm reading, and I'm like, well, then you're not supposed to lose anything if that's the case. You can see all this stuff, and that's the problem where they get to it because. It's either they run out of character. A lot of these guys, their character has been fully formed. There's really not much more to do with it in terms of that. But then they don't have any ideas in terms of story. So then it becomes, oh, let's see what new tricks we can do with this guy. And then they make tricks to the point where, okay, the Flash should never have to get out of bed, to do any of these things because he's that fast and you've given him all these abilities. He's pretty much what? He's Superman in terms of speed. Yeah. So what's the sense with it? But right now, I mean, look, we got that great shot of the two of them embracing from the Rebirth issue. And this, for me, was the highlight of that Rebirth issue. The biggest thing, though, is that you go to Titan 7, and Wally meets up with Superman. And Superman's like, hey, Wally, how's it going? He's like, you remember me? And that's one of the things I remembered in the Rebirth. I was like, well, Superman would remember him, too. So they purposely kept the two of them away so we could have this Barry Wally moment right over here. But that was something that, and this goes all the way back to the Silver Age, where you have, the mentoring, where it's not just a sidekick, but really a partner, okay, and you could draw the kids in, so on and so forth. Yeah. See, if they could somehow get this aspect back without marginalizing one character or having to have one character so the other character, can be bigger. But, to be quite honest, I just don't see how they do it. It's a zero-sum game at the end of the day. And it's because of the road that they decided to go about it, too. You weren't going to be willing to let Wally come in, take Barry's place, and it wasn't just him. They did this with Green Arrow. Green Arrow couldn't be replaced. Had to bring back Oliver Queen. Hal Jordan couldn't be replaced. Yeah. Had all these guys had to come back. Well, now you got a whole smorgasbord of these guys to choose from. And so what do you do at the end of the day?
Well, to keep replacing them with these ordinary, even beyond ordinary guys, but they're dating Jade, in the
but that speaks to Kyle Rayner. Kyle Rayner wasn't so much of a legacy character because Green Lantern didn't have it, but Wally, Wally was, literally, he was out there adventuring with Barry, was in his footsteps, and a lot of the other guys too. So now, okay, fine, all those Teen Titans who should be able to step up and take over, no, we're not going to let them do it. Okay, we're going to bring the other guys back, so now it's going to be this big, so everybody's going to have this incredibly big family. But to be quite honest, if you have 7 speedsters on Earth, you really don't need anybody else.
But just to go off to when you mentioned Green Arrow, they didn't have Speedy step up. They had Connor Hawk, who's supposed to be better
But that's
martial
the mistake.
arts better
That's the
martial arts
mistake.
than Batman.
What happens? They bring him, they give him a son who's supposed to step up Speedy, and Roy Harper. DC, what you have done to Roy Harper is criminal. Criminal. It started with putting him on drugs. But what did they do?
He got over the drugs.
Obviously not.
He quit cold turkey.
But what,
and he's
what
like,
do they do? Well, the whole thing is that Roy doesn't want to become Green Arrow because I want to be my own man and I don't want to step in. So now you have Roy Harper, then you're going to have this new character to be Green Arrow, and then, oh, you know what? Let's bring back the original Green Arrow. So now we got 3 of these bowmen over here. We'll probably throw another one in with the new Speedy. We'll probably throw another one in over here. And then before you know it, you got 7 of these guys. And you're like, well, and then of course...
Well, that's another large issue because it's not really in line for the legacy character to have to take up the mantle. And then how many times can you do that same story? Like with Wally, it felt like, okay, crisis happened, you know, somebody had to die, this, that, and the other. You accepted it. But then as you keep going, it's just saying, okay, Connor Hawk, everyone was trying to follow, they were trying to follow that lead, and then they didn't have it with Green Arrow. So I think at some point you had to stop. And my problem with it was the aspect of there was so much stuff that Barry could have done in place of Wally. And then you just had these things where you tried to legitimize Crisis, where they reference like, oh, you know, you're a good successor to Barry. And it's like, why are they still saying that? For the couple of fans that remember that Crisis is like, move on.
No, they even had stories where he went back to go fight the Anti-Monitor, which I thought was okay.
Oh,
this is a bit rich because if
yeah.
he's going back to do this,
Yeah.
Crisis never happened.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
But again, it's a zero-sum game at the end of the day when you keep writing it in this particular fashion.
Well, gentlemen, thank
Wait a second.
you.
So we have to have a vote. I'm going Barry. What are you
You're
going?
next.
I'll go last.
He's gonna go last. We know what
Wally.
you're doing. So where are we going?
Here's the tiebreaker.
I said you can only go back to the original. Barry wins it.
Yes.
Spin a rack out.